Hello, everybody. My name is Dean of the InkGuild, and welcome back to another episode of Shorthand. This time, we're going to be looking at episode 5, where Gabe and I discuss our favorite video game stories. It's a bit of a long, or it was a bit of a long recording, so as always, you're always welcome to check out the original video if you want to find out more about what we talked about. But aside from that, all of our social media will be down in the description below or wherever available. And with all that being said, let's get right into the highlights. Hi friends, how's it going? My name's Dean, joined today by Gabe. Today we're going to be talking about video game stories, and it's funny because we actually did a previous episode of this, but unfortunately the footage kind of corrupted, so if we make any allusions to that, please bear with us. We're just trying to go off of what we were saying earlier. We're going off of our own objective picks, or subjective picks, and I started with I said in the last episode that I am starting this with a kind of a half thing because this story is not the entire game. It is the campaign from Call of Duty Black Ops 1. And I think why I consider it a half pick is obviously because it's not just about the campaign in a Call of Duty game, especially nowadays. But I think for me the campaign sticks out a lot, especially because that was the period where Call of Duty was really nailing it with their campaigns. For what were essentially 5 to 6 hour stories, they were incredible. And I think, like Gabe, you agreed with me last time, did right?
Yeah, I remember saying I think the Black Ops 1 story really stood out to me. I think I really liked what they did with Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 1 story. But at the end of the day, those were still kind of a little bare bone. They were just well told, but I think Black Ops 1 was the first one that really pushed the boundary of what a Call of Duty campaign story could be.
I think the reason why is just because of the characters. I'm a big character person, I'm a pretty big character person, and if you've listened to my previous episodes, you guys will understand how important characters are to me, because they're really the ones that carry a story, especially for me, historical stories where you have relived through, or where you know about these events through documentaries and different stuff like that. But when you have solid characters like how they did in the Black Ops 1 campaign, it really kind of makes it more personal. It makes it more enjoyable to play through the entire thing. Alex Mason, played by Sam Worthington, is honestly one of my favorite characters in the entire Call of Duty campaign portion of those games.
Yeah, he feels like a fully fleshed out character. I feel like I knew Mason after I had played the game. I feel like I feel like he was a person. He wasn't just a character who had noises coming out of his face. I felt like this was a person with emotions and feelings and relationships. He was an angry man, but he wasn't like a hostile person. He was an emotional man. He was a very emotional person.
Yeah. I actually wanted to touch on that because between Mason and Woods, it's such a perfect enough foil.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
they play off each other so well in that game.
Yeah, they're two completely different personalities, and Woods is really the kind of...
But even then, he wasn't so one note.
There was still a lot of complexity there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black Ops is a very well written game. This is a lot of... we haven't even touched on the god Reznov yet, but...
Yeah, I was about to get to Reznov. There's so much complexity in these characters, and that's why, like I said in the beginning, that I love complex characters, good or evil. And Reznov definitely, even if, spoiler alert, he didn't end up actually being a legit character, it was all just a kind of a figment of Mason and his brainwashing. For the spotlight that he had, Reznov sure took it. Just in that introduction in the prison, which still to this day is one of my favorite video game levels I think ever. how he carries himself, how he how he commands his fellow prisoners, and eventually how they escape. Like, incredible. Like, incredible work. And it's really good storytelling done there. Like, and through the rest of the game too, like how Reznov has been portrayed as a apparently legit character, but then the big twist, again, spoiler alert if I haven't already said it, like where it just turns out to be a figment of Mason's imagination because of the brainwashing. Like, it had been played off so well that you didn't even really think about it at the time. Like, when you first play through it, it's like, oh, Reznov's with me. But I think upon second playthroughs, because I've played the campaign more than once, like, they really did hint at, like, Mason kind of going crazy. It's like, Mason, what are you talking about? Who are you talking to? You know, what are you, like, is there someone else here? Like,
I'm gonna change up the order a bit be your first game was a 2010 game, so I'm gonna make my first game a 2010 game. I'm gonna be talking about Fallout New Vegas for a bit. I do like a lot of story-based games, but I think Fallout New Vegas was one of the first ones that really sort of indoctrinated me into the idea of a video game story being more than just telling a story, like being something you can really interact with. And this was coming just off the heels of Fallout 3, which I don't mind Fallout 3, but the campaign in Fallout 3 is one of the worst in an RPG. Fallout New Vegas really opened my eyes to what an RPG can be, and sort of made me fall in love with like old PC RPGs that are that are built by teams that did not have the function or the development time or the budget to make the story they really wanted to. So Caesar is like my favorite villain in a video game ever. I've just been so burned by video game villains being very one note and almost just boss fights.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first talk to Caesar, he just talks to you, and you just have to engage with him verbally. You can shoot him if you want to, if you want to have a added challenge of having to then get out of the Legionnaire camp with everyone trying to kill you. Mm-hmm. It's not really worth it, especially because by killing him you miss out on the incredible dialogue of a villain of a video game giving you a comprehensive breakdown of democracy and his views on the world of a fictional setting that are like more complex than most real world political viewpoints and political analytics. This man gives you a breakdown of the flaws and faults of democracy and how in this world, in this specific, in the way the world is, a dictatorship might actually be a good thing. He's wrong, obviously. He's a psychopath, but he's so strong in his convictions. He so deeply believes in what he thinks, and he has so, like, I think this was something I talked about last time, how a big problem I have with a lot of villains in general, not just video games, but just villains in anything, is how weak they are in their convictions. You'll have a lot of villains who have very stale motivations. They'll have like, I think the good guys are actually the bad guys because I think they're bad, and that's what I think. I can handle a one-dimensional villain, and I can handle a three-dimensional villain, but I can't handle a one-dimensional villain with like half-assed complexity behind them.
Yeah. And my second pick hasn't changed from the last episode either, and that is The Last of Us. I think the best summary of my points for The Last of Us is, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something said in a Girlfriend Reviews video. And if you think about how much there is to The Last of Us, so it's a post-apocalyptic action-adventure, third-person, kind of zombie survival, narrative-driven story, on top of being developed by the people who developed the Uncharted series, Naughty Dog. It really seemed like it would be so much, and it may or may not have worked out. And thankfully, it turned out to be one of the best games of its given year, and one of the best games personally that I've ever played, because the story and how it handles every kind of complexity that works in its favor, Naughty Dog does it super, super well. you have Joel and Ellie, who have one of the best mentor student relationships that there ever is in a video game, in my opinion. And I mean that by just how Joel treats kind of everything around him, and how that works really well when it comes to Ellie. That makes any sense? Like, they learn from each other. They're both excellently voice casted. They work so well together. So if you watch any behind the scenes videos, like, they've really acted together too. Like they did the mocap for their characters. So you had that natural kind of, like, you know, it wasn't like they could really bounce off of each other because it was mocapped. So you could get their proper facial reactions as they were saying their lines. And you can't really do that sometimes. Like, if you're just talking to a green screen, then what's the point of, you know, you can't really emote. You can't really have that kind of natural connection that you do with another person, even if you're acting, right? Their dialogue is written really, really, really well. And I think, case in point, one of my favorite scenes from The Last of Us was when, I think it was just a confrontation between Joel and Ellie, actually, where it was like Joel was, I guess, kind of angry with Ellie, and like there was parts of an exchange where it was like Joel was saying that you aren't my daughter, Ellie. Like, don't try to think otherwise. I'm just trying to get you from point A to point B. And I don't know if it was in the exact same scene, but Ellie was kind of backing herself up, being strong, but also admitting that she was scared. And you could see that through the entire thing. Like, she is, like, I was talking about foils earlier, and they are perfect foils for each other, because while Joel maintains like a very fatherly kind of personality where he is, you know, kind of to himself, he just wants to get the job done, but also is looking out for someone. Ellie is younger. She's kind of, you know, trying to make light of the situation, but is also so much more vulnerable compared to Joel, because she doesn't really know a lot, and it plays off so well, their relationship. For a story that has so much to it, like I said already, like, they really do manage to make everything work. Like, complex character relationships, a post-apocalyptic setting, a lot of heart to these characters, and a lot of complexity. It just works. Pass it over to you now. So, what would your second pick be for?
My second pick is, I've talked about this before, I think on other episodes of the podcast. I'm not sure if I have, but I've definitely talked about it with you. Anyone who knows me in person, I've talked about this game with you before. I have to have. This game is Nier Automata.
Cue the applause.
Nier Automata has one of the most insane stories that I think I've ever played in a video game. I think I mentioned this during the first recording. I wrote a paper on this game's story for a science fiction literature course. Nier Automata is one of the most gorgeous, beautiful, thought-provoking, heart-wrenching games I've ever played in my entire life. Almost entirely because of its incredible narrative. The story of Nier Automata is it's a story about, like, it presents itself as you're this sexy kung fu android in a French maid costume. It seems from the outset to be the most stereotypical Japanese game ever made, and then you play it and you get this story about what is essentially godlessness in a modern setting. Like, you get this story about the nature of humanity and what it means to have a belief system and to have convictions. This game goes beyond just characters having convictions, but breaks down why human beings have convictions and why human beings believe in things, and why those things are ultimately stupid and pointless. Because what if there is, like, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it really gets into the bare bone knuckle of, like, what if there's nothing else? What if there's truly nothing else? What if we're alone in the universe? The game story, basically, I'll give a quick recap of the first third of the game to summarize what blows, I think, a lot of people's minds out of the water about this game.
Everyone listening, here's your spoiler alert.
you play as this android named 2B, who is a part of this android fighting force that fights as proxy soldiers for humanity, who need proxy soldiers because thousands of years ago aliens attacked the Earth and decimated the planet with their own proxy soldiers, which are called machines. So on Earth, there's this endless century-spanning war between androids and machines that has ravaged the planet. They just keep killing each other for their own deities, essentially. They're creators, the humans and the aliens. And then halfway through the game, you meet these two machines who appear very human-like, called Adam and Eve. Very, very subtle imagery going on there. Yeah, but they basically show you that all of the aliens have been long dead. The alien and the machines have been basically stuck on Earth with nothing to really fight for and nothing to do, which this sort of explains all the strange behaviors you're seeing. As you've been going through the game, you've been seeing machines trying to dance to music. But once you really like dig deep into it and if you take the story seriously, what you're essentially watching is a bunch of creatures who have been bred for combat. They know nothing else but war and violence, and they've been left without any purpose in their life. So they have started forming some sort of human emotion. They've started forming love. They've started forming. They don't know how to interpret this information. They're sort of learning what it means to be human. And while this is happening, 2B is also learning this. 2B is also sort of learning how to develop a camaraderie with her partner 9S. She's learning how to like what emotions are. Androids are forbidden from expressing human emotions, but in a weird act of irony, they still can. They're just not allowed. It's not programmed out of them to not be able to do it. They just can't. And as you go through the game, you then end up discovering as 9S that all of the humans as well have died. And what you essentially realize about the story is that you're essentially two sides of this endless conflict fighting for absolutely no reason other than you literally know nothing else. These characters they have no idea what they would do. And 9S's whole story revolves around the idea that 9S, upon discovering this, has to be killed, because if he leaks the information of that humanity doesn't exist anymore, that it would mean that the war is over and that the androids would then have would have no meaning in their life. And of course, Command doesn't want that, because they don't want a legion of hyper intelligent machines having an existential crisis, because they've seen what the machines do when they have that. They develop insane culty religions and they start just killing each other and kidnapping each other. And it's this what you realize the game is really about, and what the story is really about, is this fight against an idea of intellectual freedom, against the idea of blissful ignorance.
My final pick is God of War 2018. I think what makes, as I've been talking about in previous episodes where I have loved the characters, God of War 2018 really kind of hits the nail on the dot with it, because I grew up playing the God of War games when I really shouldn't have. Because if you guys are familiar with God of War, that was back when, Kratos was still in ancient Greece, and it was a much different kind of tone with what God of War is right now, whereas some of you might be more familiar with. I essentially grew up with Kratos being one of the big video game characters that I really kind of latched onto, because his story was sympathetic enough. He'd been tricked into murking his family, and his vengeance story, and just how complex, and how it complex in the sense that it really spanned across all of Greece at the time. It took him to Hades, it took him to the mortal world, it took him to Olympus, it took him everywhere. But keep in mind, this was still at a time where Kratos, though his story was sympathetic, there wasn't really a lot to him. It was more just rage, which, was fine. But as I personally grew up kind of wanting to have more complexity with my characters, and really taking a heart to three-dimensional characters. Kratos, at the time, there wasn't really a lot to it. When it had been announced that they were working on a sequel, and not just a sequel, but like a fully fleshed out version that had grown up with the times, I was hooked right from the start. Because for many things, I think because I had grown up with Kratos as one of my big influential video game characters, like I was so invested and I knew where he had come from and how much he had been through. So the fact that they are starting on an almost clean slate, where he has still lived through all those memories, but he is now set in a completely different mythology, in a completely different world, like I was intrigued from the start. And there had been talks after God of War 3 that they were going into that anyway, but to actually have it defined and ready for the fan base like me, super ready for that. Another thing was Norse mythology. Maybe I'm just wrong about this, but Norse mythology really hadn't deserved, or really hadn't gotten the kind of love that Greek mythology had been getting. And I'm glad now that really God of War is one of the big games that puts more emphasis on that, because Norse mythology is pretty amazing. I think definitely what really hooked me was the father-son dynamic between Kratos and Atreus. And like I was talking about with The Last of Us, like having an older figure as a mentor for a younger figure always makes for a really interesting story. It could be a brother or sister, it could be, two complete strangers, it could be a father and son. And I really wanted to see just how good they would carry that relationship, because this wasn't coming at a time right after Ascension. This was coming after games such as Uncharted 4, Horizon Zero Dawn, Life is Strange, Nier Automata. Like, after storytelling had become such an art form in video games, that like, how were they going to handle this? And they handled it perfectly, in my opinion. It is such a good story because it acknowledges a lot of Kratos' past and adapts it to a new audience. It's a whole new world essentially for God of War. And so, with that being said, Gabe, what is your final pick for best video game story?
My final pick for best video game story is this weird little indie Russian game that I played very recently, called Pathologic. Pathologic is a game about this group of Russian doctors. You play as one of three doctors, the Bachelor, the Haruspex, or the Changeling, who each enter this strange unnamed Russian town in a geographically nondescript part of Russia in a time setting that does not exist. And essentially are tasked with 12 days to cure a plague in what is essentially a immersive sim, where you have to deal with food, you have to deal with hunger, you have to deal with sleep, and of course, since there's a plague, you have to deal with infection and immunity. It's one of the weirdest games I've ever played, and it has one of the best. The reason I bring it up today, though, is because it has one of the most engagingly written and well-told stories in a video game. I'm not going to say that it's a very cinematic game or that it's like a very emotional game, but it's a game that has provoked a lot of thought as I played it, and it's one that I don't know. It really got its hooks in me as I was playing it. It's one of the most It's a game where gameplay and storytelling are sort of done through the same thing. Like there's of course like story that is just directly you talking to someone else and getting their thoughts. And there's like the Fallout New Vegas thing, which I won't spend too much time on with this game, but there's like the aspect of characters having opinions on their world and of the plague. But one of the things this game does astoundingly well is really placing you in this world, in this story of mystery and anxiety through how you engage with it. The dialogue is nuts. The dialogue is my favorite part of the game. Every line is sort of written with this
with impact,
with impact and it's very and just very dreamlike quality. The whole thing is organized like it's some kind of play it, and characters will talk as if they're all monologuing. Just play Pathologic, bro.
Yeah, Chad, play Pathologic. All right, so I guess after a very hectic recording session as of right now, thank you guys for listening. I guess as with these podcasts, we've been doing kind of a final sign off. So I guess as a discussion, or as a very, very quick discussion, what are 1 or 2 games that have a good story that deserve an honorable mention? My first honorable mention is Life is Strange, Season 1, with Max and Chloe. Don't really need to say a lot about it. If you can bear through the fact, like if you've never played through Life is Strange before, your only thing that is stopping you from enjoying everything that game is how out of sync sometimes the voice acting is. Keep in mind that like the voice acting in that game is incredible, but like I think it's just like a development thing, but their mouths don't speak the words properly, and that's been since fixed in later installments of Life is Strange. But Life is Strange Season 1 with Max and Chloe is an absolute must. It is a very, very personal, very character-heavy story, and it's a good thing. It's a good enough... well, I don't want to say just good enough, because it's more than that. It really is a good LGBTQ plus friendly story. My second recommendation, and I guess I don't remember much out of this, but it's Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It is one of the grittiest, most realistic interpretations of war that I think I've ever really played. There's this one pivotal moment in the game which I don't want to get into right now, but it just flips the entire dynamic of the story. Because
does it? Does it rhyme with Schmite Schmusverse?
Yes. When you reach that point, everything suddenly starts to change, and don't think that that's the only good thing about that game either, because it really does carry itself throughout the entire experience. It is so good. Gabe, what were your 1 or 2 picks be?
Weirdly enough, I just scrambled to find another one because Spec Ops: The Line was one of them.
Oh.
That was good to say. The first one I'm gonna ring off, especially for the story, Red Dead Redemption 2's story.
Yes.
I think Red Dead Redemption 2's story is like probably one of the most heartbreaking and compelling story campaigns I've ever played in a video game. If we ever do a follow-up to this, I will elaborate on that. That'll probably be one of my picks.
Mm-hmm.
Red Dead Redemption 2's story is beautiful, and it's one of the most incredible stories in a video game, I think. The other one I wanted to mention real quick, because it's another one of my absolute favorites ever made, is this game called Oxenfree. I think I've mentioned this one to you before.
You've recommended it to me, yeah.
Yeah. I still think everyone should play it, especially if you're a fan of Life is Strange. It very much has that sort of quality. I can't quite say for sure what that quality is, but it has, that quality.
There's a certain charm to it.
Yeah. It's basically it's about these teenagers who all go to this island for like a summer trip, I guess, but end up discovering it's haunted and I'll have to get the fuck out. It has some of the best dialogue I think I've ever... Again, very dialogue heavy game, but it has some of the best dialogue I think I've ever seen in a game. And the story is wonderful. And yeah, if we do another one, I'll definitely be talking more about that one too.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely love to do another one of these. So I guess with all that being said, thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.